Are we live? As I fall out of the chair? Terrific. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out for Thriller Night, which seems to be an annual December event at the Poison Pen. So I love doing that. These are all books that are fun to read and books that you can gift to people. And we'll talk about legacy publishing tonight, too, and what that actually means. So, virtual audience, thank you very much for joining us. And we're going to start out with Brett Battles over there, the new Stewart Woods.
3 years now, so not so new.
Not so new, right.
Yes.
Well, I have to say, at the risk of alienating Stewart Woods fans, that I think that Brett actually is writing better books than Stewart did, at least towards the
That's
end.
very kind. That's
No,
very
and I
kind.
really mean it.
Thank you.
And I like Teddy Fay a lot. He's a great character. He's a former spy. He's a master of disguise. And, you know, it's kind of fun to do something like corporate raiding or takeovers as opposed to like military action.
True, true.
Just as a mix, because we are going to be talking about military action otherwise.
You got a lot of military tonight. And
We
none
do.
of it's coming from me.
No. And Jack, who has been writing his own Battleborn series, 4 volumes thereof, has taken over or is writing in the W.E. Griffin universe and brought back The Presidential Agent. And I think this is what, number 9 in the series?
This is number 10.
Number 10.
Yeah, number 9 was written by those guys back there.
I missed that. How did I miss that, Brian and Jeff? I'm so sorry. Right. Well, anyway, and so The Presidential Agent, let's start off with you. We're in Virginia Beach, where my entire in-law family lives and where I have spent an amazing amount of time. And I was so surprised originally to discover that it was such a military base, but it's so near Norfolk.
Oh, yeah. So that's where I got my start, really, in the Navy. I was a Navy pilot for 23 years, and I went to Virginia Beach to learn how to fly the F-18. And I remember signs everywhere that said, sailors stay off my lawn and stuff like that, but people would fight back and say, it's the sound of freedom, it's not jet noise. And, so there's this nice rivalry between the people of Virginia Beach and the Navy people of the town. But it is a big Navy town between Norfolk and Virginia Beach and then Dam Neck and the whole area
All
there.
the way down to Charleston.
All the way down.
Right.
All the way down.
I know. I read the other day in some history of the Revolution that Norfolk was pretty much destroyed during the American Revolution. So built back up considerably.
It is. I mean, it is the focal point for the Navy on the East Coast, really. I mean, the entire surface fleet is at Norfolk, minus some other ships that are located elsewhere, like in Jacksonville or Mayport. But they consider Oceana, the Naval Air Station in Virginia Beach, the master jet base for the East Coast. So that's where all the Navy tactical air is. And so I'm very familiar with that area. But it was a very fitting place to start the book based on the reason Charlie Castillo goes there, which is, well, I don't want to give it away yet, but
How soon does it appear in the book?
pretty early.
That's
Pretty early
right.
on.
So you probably,
yeah.
you probably get.
Yeah.
Poor Charlie gets sort of taken out early in the book, so you might as well.
He does.
discuss
So
that.
yeah, the presidential agent, Charlie Castillo, if you've read any of the previous books, he has a illegitimate son, which he refers to as his bastard son. And the last time you see him in the series, his son is a teenager and he's wearing a naval aviation T-shirt in Pensacola, Florida. I said, well, I know what he's doing, so I made him a Navy pilot. So that's why Charlie goes to Virginia Beach.
Well, you're a Top Gun pilot yourself, right? In fact, the
course.
Battleborn series are Top Gunners, or at least one person.
Yes,
Yeah. So you brought a lot of great stuff to it.
I try to. Yeah.
Right. Had you read, just in the interests of talking about legacy publishing, had you read Griffin yourself before this came up?
I hadn't read this series, but I had read when I was a kid. I read the Brotherhood of War series,
Okay.
and that really helped influence me in my decision to serve in the military. I was telling this story earlier tonight. In 1985, an article in Boys Life magazine came out, and it talked about the Naval Academy. It was a day in the life of the Naval Academy, and there was this feature on King Hall, which is where all 4,000 midshipmen eat at once. And I said,
And the Marines.
but it's all midshipmen. So it's 4,000 students at this place, and they all eat in one place in King Hall. And I said, that's where I'm going to school. And so around the same time, I was reading Griffin's Brotherhood of War series, and so that was all influencing me to want to go into the Navy. Well, when this opportunity came up to write for this series, I wrote a letter to the son, W.E.B. Griffin's son, and I told him this whole story about Boys Life magazine and the reason why I wanted to serve. And he wrote back and said, I was an editor of Boys Life magazine, and that was the first article I worked on.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, I think I got the job.
So are you going to continue with your Battleborn series, or are you, I know it's a tricky question, in part because the people that distributed it, they through no fault of your publisher, went bankrupt. And so it's difficult now to figure out how that's going to work.
Yeah, it was a 4-book contract, and I would love to continue writing in that series, but I think I need to find the right home for it. And in the meantime, other things have popped up. I started writing the Silent Horizon series that I'm co-authoring with Chad Robichaux, and that's with Tyndale. I have this W.E.B. Griffin. I was given the Jack Ryan Jr. series, and now I have a contract with a new imprint at Blackstone for another series. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And
wow, what are you doing in the cockpit? I mean, are you actually
Yeah.
flying?
Yeah,
Are you
yeah.
writing on napkins?
Yeah,
You know?
autopilot's an amazing thing these days. No, no, I don't write in the cockpit. Sometimes, most times.
Well, I mean, T.J. Newman lives here, and we all know the story of how that worked out.
But flight attendants are a little bit different than pilots.
Yeah, right. Anyway, those are all really exciting things. So what happens? Charlie, we might as well say, because it happens right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Charlie is hurt, and so we are left in suspense about how
Yeah.
Charlie will do. But
So-
so what happens?
So I mentioned, Andrews and Wilson wrote Book 9, Rogue Asset, and they introduced this character, P.K. McCoy, and he was a Marine Raider, and he was going to be Charlie's understudy. He was going to be groomed to be the next presidential agent, and there's a lot of family history. So if you're a Griffin fan, the name McCoy and PK, all that stuff, it's going to come out. You're going to understand who he is. But one of the things that they did, it was a true gift to me, was they left a lot of his backstory untold. So what happens in the beginning of my book is Charlie Castillo, it basically interrupts a terrorist attack in Virginia Beach, and he gets wounded and ends up in the hospital. And now the president needs to call on somebody to figure out what happened and why, and if there's going to be another attack, and stop it. And so they basically call P.K. McCoy, his nickname is Killer, and they basically make him the new presidential agent. And so he suddenly is thrust into the spotlight. He's now the guy. And so that's where the story really takes root. So basically, this is McCoy's unveiling as the presidential agent.
Tell me what the presidential agent actually does.
Anything the president wants without bureaucracy and red tape. So if you think
It's kind of a fixer.
basically, yeah, if the president doesn't want to deal with the bureaucracy of the CIA or the military, and wants to say, you go do this, that's the person. So he doesn't operate within the confines of the, let's say the FBI has to deal with the Constitution and all that, lame stuff. And the military
in
has,
fiction anyway.
Yeah, in fiction,
Yeah,
right? In fiction, and the military has other rules they have to follow. Well, he doesn't have any of those. He can do whatever he needs to do to get the job done.
Do you know there's a series by a man named Mike Lawson who's going to come and see us at the end of January, and he has a guy called Joe DeMarco who is a fixer for a senior congressman, and it makes you realize that fixers seem to be an inevitable part of our government. Or maybe any government for that matter. And in fact, Stuart Brett's guy, Teddy Fay, was a CIA agent.
He was. He never in the series, even when
Right.
Stewart wrote him, he wrote him after Teddy had left the CIA. But he wasn't. He was an agent a little bit, but he was more somebody who developed different technologies and stuff within the agency, but also became a master of disguise. definitely Teddy, but now he's a Hollywood producer living under,
So a fixer of his own,
a fixer
right.
of his own
Yeah,
in
okay.
that way. Well, yeah, Teddy is okay. Billy Barnett is the movie producer, his movie producer persona, and Teddy is Billy's fixer, really, in many ways. So.
Right, and in this book, he gets to do all kinds of really fun stuff. And Stone Barrington, and this is an interesting point because Jack Carr and I had a big discussion about his most recent book, which they did not call Terminalist number, whatever it would have been, 5, 6, whatever. They instead gave it a new thing. And if you have a brand, and people are used to that, if you are Stephanie Plum or whatever, you should stick to the brand is kind of the idea. So I noticed that on the cover of your book, it definitely says with Stone Barrington,
Yeah,
and he has a cameo.
All the Teddy books, which are all, while Stewart was still alive, are all co-written with Stewart, but all
Right.
had co-writers do those. But they always, one of the requirements of those books was for Stone Barrington to make an appearance.
Exactly.
And he's usually at the beginning of each book. I usually put him at the beginning and the end of each one.
Walk-ons.
Yeah, walk-ons. But, get him a little involved here and there. But then again, I also put Teddy into the Stone books too. In fact, I'm writing a Stone book right now, which Teddy's going to play a big part of, and a lot of the Hollywood people are in the Stone book this time. So.
It may sound odd when we're talking about Hollywood, but I personally find Teddy more believable than Stone. I do. I mean, Stone is
Stone.
right.
Stone is a very lucky man who falls into a ton of money all the time,
And women.
and women.
Yep.
Although, if you read the ones I've been reading, he's been a little less wild in that area. And in fact, the one that comes out in June, which is Deepwater, which I think is my favorite one yet that I've written of his. Just see what happens to him in that one. But yeah, he's got his own Gulf Stream. He's got houses in Paris and London and the countryside in England and L.A. and Key West and New York and in Maine.
Right. And his own Gulf Stream.
Yeah,
and,
Gulfstream, and he
his
has
own
Cessna,
boat
and
and a
he's
collection
got-
of cars and a townhouse in New York.
And he's one of the part owners of this luxury hotel chain. He's part of this investment firm. He's a part owner, and on top of being a partner in the law firm where he works.
And he sleeps with the president
And
when she was also the vice president.
He does,
I
or
know.
he has been. He's not as much lately, but yes, he has
Right.
been sleeping with her lately.
Well, yes, you probably took a slight rein in on all that.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah, he's an interesting character. It's like money is never a problem. So I have to be careful because whatever problems come to him that could easily be solved with money would make the stories very short because he could do that, right? So he just kind of he or people he's around run afoul of different things in the Stone books. Yeah.
right. Well, happily, he also has a stake in a hotel chain.
Right.
And so, as well as his son is running the movie
His son
business.
is a
Right.
Academy Award winning movie director.
That's right.
He is.
So this
Yeah.
book takes advantage of that. Centurion Pictures. And so they're all...
Yeah, Blown Away is a Teddy led book, and what I wanted to do on this one, the last book I did, Golden Hour, was basically hunting down this somebody who's trying to kill all these different spies by Billy/Teddy going on a PR tour through Europe. And then, kind of sneaking away while he's doing that to figure out what's going on. And this time I wanted to kind of bring in a little bit of like that old Hollywood lure feeling and the lure of old Hollywood into it. And so I said, well, I'm going to set the majority of it in Palm Springs because that's like classic Hollywood where the stars definitely used to go. Some of them still go. One of the characters in this book is like a retired 70-year-old actor he throws a big birthday party there, which is a big pivotal moment in the book. What it starts off as is that Peter Barrington, who's Stone's son, and his wife are borrowing a house from a friend in Palm Springs, where Peter's there rewriting his latest screenplay, and Teddy and a couple of the other people from the studio are going to go visit for a week. And it's during this week that they're there that all sorts of things happen. There's an Eastern European oligarch who wants a piece of the new energy business in the form of the wind turbine business, which is really big in that area. So that plays a part. There's a brilliant engineer who she's a little bit on the spectrum, so she's not always catching everything, but she's brilliant and she's coming up with these things, so people are trying to take advantage of her. And then the big Hollywood actors party, and it all comes together, and Teddy ends up having to save the day, of course.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
Actually, thrillers, I think, depend as much or maybe more on the antagonist, on the bad guy, as the good guys. And you created one who's really disgusting in this book. I mean, he's incredibly rude.
I wouldn't want to hang out with him.
No, you really would not. And
No.
I thought you really did a great job
Thank
with
you.
that. I mean, some
appreciate it.
of Stone Barrington's antagonists were not so evil, but this guy really is.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
Is that
So-
a compliment?
No, it was
Well,
a
I-
compliment, absolutely.
About what
So
part
those
of
of
it
you
was.
who
Thank you.
have been here a long time would remember that Stewart lived in Santa Fe for a lot of the time, and he always went to the LA Times Book Festival, so we were a convenient fooling stop. He would fly in his jet over to, and then he taught his last wife how to fly the plane, so she flew it, and they would come into the Scottsdale Air Park, and then they would come down here. And Stewart, I just loved, Stewart would, have a room full of people, and he would sit down in a chair, and he would say something like, "This is my new book, I'll take questions." So one day, your publisher said to me, "Is there any way that we could actually get Stewart to talk to people?" And tragically, the old live stream technology hasn't really held up. If we'd only had Zoom,
Right.
we would still have a record. But so your publisher, Ivan, said to me, "Can you actually get him to do it?" So I did. He talked for 45 minutes. It was absolutely amazing. And we went through all of this, and I'm so sad that it's lost, because, I mean, it's probably there somewhere. Right. It's probably somewhere out in the universe if we could just discover where it is.
Who has that?
Yeah, but it would have been fun for you and for everybody
I
to
would love to
actually
see
hear
that.
Stewart talk
I
about
would
his
love
books.
that.
And, even though I sound like I'm making fun of him, I thought he was a wonderful writer, and he won an Edgar for his first book. I mean, he was a very talented writer. I think what happened is that he wrote 4 books a year towards the end of his life, and it's hard to write 4 books a year and go deep.
I'm 63, and it's hard to write 3 books a year at this point. I used to be able to do 3 or 4 books a year 10, 15 years ago. Now, not so much. But
Poor Brett.
Yes,
Brett was an absolutely fabulous thriller writer who actually went on his own to do independent publishing because his regular publisher wouldn't let him publish books as often as he wanted to. And
sort of part of
that was part of it.
part of the reason, yeah. But yes, and did that for a long time, and then also got back with Stewart. But before then, I had a couple other publishers put some stuff out for mine, and I still do independent when I can, but I don't really have time at the moment to write anything.
No, you don't.
but
I've
the
always
Stewart
loved
books.
Brett's books and his writing, so
Thank
it's been great. I love it when we've actually had a relationship from the beginning, like we have with you, and with Brett, who was here for his very first book. And
yeah.
I know it's great. Anyway, so we know that you're writing another book. What is it that you are publishing next?
For me, the next one that I'm publishing is the second book in the Silent Horizon series, and that one's Riptide. It comes out in May.
Okay.
And then next September will be my first Jack Ryan Jr. novel. The title is Pressure Depth. It was just announced. It's on the website now, but I don't have a cover for it yet. But I'm excited about that one.
So we get to see you a lot more often.
Yes, it looks that way.
I love it. Okay. So what's happened in that? Tell us what's happened in the Clancy series, because you guys are moving out, right? And Mike Woodward is moving up to the Jack Ryan Sr., and you are now going to writing Jack Ryan Jr. because Don Bentley went over to write in the Vince Flynn universe.
It's this big shakeup, and it's hard to keep track of it. But I was joking earlier that those guys stepped down, and it got me a book deal, so I'm very grateful. Thank you. But they've left some huge shoes to fill, and I think Mike in the Jack Ryan Jr. series, he did some amazing work, and he's going to be a great person to take over the senior series. And so I've just been honored to that I was able to get asked to step into that series. And Mike Woodward and I have a good relationship, and we're communicating, and we're trying to work together to try to make our books sync up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm really excited about the Clancy verse and where it's going.
What I think is so wonderful in legacy publishing is that the original characters and the original concept and so forth, that various people are able to step into it and continue it, and it still feels wonderful. It still feels like Clancy, and we don't know how Clancy would have evolved if he were still alive and still writing, do we?
I mean, I can almost guarantee that he would not be writing the quality that we got with Mark Graney and Mark Cameron and Don Bentley and Anders and Wilson. I mean, Act of Defiance, I think, is probably one of my favorite Clancy books that they wrote.
I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. So I do think that that Tom Clancy, for as great as he was starting to slow down in terms of what readers were expecting.
But his books were also a product of the time that he wrote them.
Absolutely,
and the technology and the geopolitics and all, and it's all moved on. So what I think is so great is that you guys keep the basics, but you keep moving it forward. We also are the home for all the Clive Cussler authors and all, and they've done the same thing, and they've done a wonderful job, keeping the things that people loved about Clive, but also moving them into this last book by Mike Madden was absolutely spectacular. So I think it's such a gift to the fans, that you get to stay in that world, but you also get to move forward in it.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan first and foremost, and so for me, it's I get to play in my favorite sandbox. I get to all the toys that I've been looking at my whole life, I now get to play with and move them around and make them do things I want them to do and say the things I want them to say.
Right.
And so it's I mean, like I'm a kid on Christmas morning every time I sit down on my computer now.
When you're not flying.
When I'm not flying.
Right. I still have that. Well, thanks, guys. Why don't we shift over to Jeff and Brian, and then you guys can talk about interesting future developments. Right. It would have been sort of cool if we could have done this on November 11th, because you two are Navy veterans. Jack is a native. Brett's the outlier here, but three of you.
We should plan a big
Veterans
Day event sometime.
We could.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, Jack wanted to publish his latest book on November 11th as well, because he thought that would be. So maybe we can have a mini thriller event. We can't call it Thriller Fest, but we can give it our own.
All right, we'll come up with a name. You guys can help us brainstorm a great name that would have everyone come.
Yes, it'll be wonderful. So this new book, one of the things I was so enchanted with, and it's really hard, I think, sometimes to write about Africa. It doesn't seem to grab people in the same way. But you brought in a Ryan character that we haven't really spent any time with, namely young Kyle. And I thought the whole dynamic there with Kyle and his sister was fabulous. So what inspired you to pick up Kyle?
And we had when we did Act of Defiance, which was our first installment, the whole motivation with Katie Ryan, which was the first new Ryan. Like the last time you saw Katie, she was 6, right? And being kidnapped. And the motivation for bringing Katie and then Kyle was we were trying to bring the series for that book in particular because it was the 40th anniversary of Hunt for the Red October, and it was going to be a submarine book, and it was almost like a sequel 40 years later. What we wanted to capture was that sort of vibe from the original books, which was, Jack Ryan, before he was a president, he was a young CIA analyst. He was a fish out of water. He was way in over his head, but he was a dog with a bone. Well, he's the president now, so he can't be dropped onto the deck of a submarine anymore, and he can't be doing all these things. And so we're like, how can we capture that nostalgic feel of those original books? And when we poured through and realized no one had done anything with Katie or Kyle, we were like, well, then they're ours. and so we said, well, okay, so Katie and Kyle have forged their own paths. Jack Jr. is an operator. He's a door kicker, unlike his dad. And Kyle has gone off and done other things. And Katie and their sister, of course, is a surgeon like Mom. And so Katie is the one that, unbeknownst to her, she really has followed in Jack's footsteps, right? She is a naval intelligence officer. She's now working at the Office of Naval Intelligence, and she's the dog with a bone. So that was sort of how they came to be to begin with. And in that first book, Kyle is there, but he's sort of way in the background. And it was a little intentional. We sort of kept him to ourselves because we knew we were going to need something else. So where it's very vague, he's doing some weird thing out there in the Middle East, and we knew we would circle back to him. But this book was the perfect opportunity to bring him forward. And what we wanted to do, and maybe Brian can talk to this, we wanted to do it in a way that was unique. We didn't want him to be just like Jack Jr. We didn't want him to be anything like Katie. We wanted him to be his own man. So that was a struggle to figure out what's different about him, not just socially and all that, but career-wise, and how is he forging his own path.
Right. And how are his parents going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Both of them. Right. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that intrigued us about the entire series is that when you first meet Jack Ryan, early on, like Jeff was saying, he's a family man. And the Ryan family is in the family business of protecting America. And so we really decided to sort of lean into that and embrace that. And, Act of Defiance was book number 24 in the series. A lot of great ideas, but a lot of great ideas, came before us. And so being able to bring Katie and Kyle into the series allowed us to maybe take a little bit of the spotlight off of Jack and the presidency and show a different side of him, but also, bring back that real family dynamic that you had in Patriot Games and in the earlier books. And so we're pretty proud of that. And I think, this is our last Clancy, but I think that's where we left our mark as a writing team, is sort of maybe setting a new direction for the series and giving it some, an injection of life here.
Are you sad that you're leaving it, or excited that you're going on to other projects?
I think it's impossible to not be a little sad.
Yeah, it's definitely both. So,
I'm sad. That's the reason I asked.
well, that's
right.
very kind of you to say. It was, when Tom came back to us, and it was time, right? We had finished the contract. They'd renewed with the estate, and I guess I do feel a little bad that he maybe felt a little blindsided, because I think he came to us like, okay, let's get the next one done, and we had talked about it because we knew it was coming. And for us, it was heartbreaking because we've fallen in love. First of all, we've been in love with the Ryan verse since we were kids. Like, you've heard us in other times we talked to you. We talked about Brian reading, Hunt for the Red October while standing, not standing watch, hopefully, but while aboard a submarine. And those books in high school affected my desire, and in college, my desire to serve in the Navy. And so, and then we brought these new characters to it. So they're like our kids, right? And, we're handing them off to somebody else. So it was heartbreaking, but it really just came down to logistics with all the new things that we have going on. We're writing 3 series a year, plus we've got all the other things,
Right, which we can talk about, or at least I assume we can, but focusing back on Clancy, there's been a lot of, looking at Africa, the Chinese Belt and Road, all the rest of it. And when I said earlier, Africa sometimes is a hard slog for thrillers, I think it's going to become more visible because there's a lot more happening there. I mean, for a long time it was the Cold War, and then it was the Middle East, and now, where are we? Venezuela probably coming up. In fact, that was the Mike Madden book that I mentioned for the Cussler, was the Darien Gap, and then the Chinese at the other end of it. Really brilliant combination. But anyway, so what we're looking at is a guy in Angola who feels that the lack of American support has cost him being president. And so he's all pissed off about that, and he wants to stage a coup. And what he needs to do is neutralize the Chinese, right?
Yeah, and I think, when our storytellers, we're also a little bit prognosticators. So,
Right.
One of the things that we do and that we get excited about doing is looking at the current state of geopolitics, and then we get to put on our what if hats, and we start to, like Jack was saying, it's the sandbox. We get to play and imagine, okay, well, if this happened, what would happen next? And if this happened, what would happen next? And we all know from, as students of history that, the United States makes alliances, and we do move chess pieces over the world. And sometimes when we leave, it creates a vacuum, and bad things happen. And so, we wanted to sort of, bring that idea to the forefront, that a lot of these guys that have, aspirations for power, it doesn't go away just because they lose round one, right? So
Right.
Baptista's a perfect example of that. He was on the losing side, and we thought, okay, let's say you're on the losing side, but you want to try again. How would you go about doing that?
And that's where the world geopolitics comes in, and that's why the east coast of Africa is so fascinating, right? Because, like you say, we focused on Europe and the Cold War. We focused on the Middle East for 2 decades. But Africa's always been there, and the east coast of Africa in particular. The west coast of Africa feels very much like an extension of Middle East conflict. But the east coast of Africa is of tremendous geopolitical importance. Not only do they have an enormous amount of resources that the whole world needs, but they don't really have the economy to profit from it. So they need partners. But they also offer an opportunity for access to the Atlantic that right now we sort of monopolize, right? We being the United States, of course, but also our partners. So the Atlantic is sort of ours, right? That's ours. Yeah, the Russians will come in and the Chinese will play, but we own the Atlantic. But what if we didn't? What if someone could get a stronghold on the Atlantic on the other side of the shore? And that's what the east coast of Africa represents.
You bet. Actually, Brad Thor's been writing about that same issue, but up in Norway, in Scandinavia, with the thawing out of the top of the globe,
Yep.
that people can come down now and do that. I noticed the other day, I don't know if you read it, but there's some young, or not now young, but anyway, Chinese entrepreneur that decided that he could buy up domain names in Africa that were not being used. So basically GoDaddy. And he has created this enormous problem because he now owns all this stuff. And the Africans, as a result, are really hurting in terms of internet access and other stuff. And the guy is claiming he hasn't done anything wrong, and the Africans are trying to take it back. And this is the kind of thing, I think, that, when you're talking about moving a series forward, those are the kinds of things you can write about that, Tom Clancy, I mean, there wasn't any of that, back then. So a challenge, it seems to me, would be keeping up, but with the global politics, but also, these areas of dispute and commerce or whatever.
Yeah, and you see in the very opening of the book, and you mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
So if the United States has an interest in, partnering with Angola or getting a foothold there, what if you're second to the party? So in this case, China has already sealed deals. They're building infrastructure, and if they're building the entire telecommunications infrastructure out in that country, well, how are you, United States, going to go operate there and not be compromised? And so we sort of pose that question right out of the gate.
So what is Kyle's actual role? I mean, what is he doing there?
And that we don't want to give too much away,
No.
because it is a big reveal, because people have been asking about Kyle since we wrote him into Act of Defiance. But the challenge with anything Jack Ryan is to find that balance, like what Brian was talking about at the beginning, trying to bring it back to that family thing. Like we used the analogy in another interview recently of the TV show Blue Bloods. If you watch Blue Bloods, why does that show work? Well, it's just another police procedural, right? But it works because of the intimate family relationships that are there, and they all have different roles in the family business thing. And that's what we wanted to sort of create here. But it's Clancy, so you must have global stakes and you must have geopolitics. So finding a way to blend Kyle in there was the challenge. And what we came up with is that, again, we're not going to give it away here, but he has found his own path to serve his nation using the special gifts that are unique to him and the family. He's not a door kicker. He's not an analyst. No. But, man, he's a tech and STEM genius. And so he has found a way to serve in that capacity. And as a result, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. The title of the novel is Executive Power, and that's a play on the struggle that we have in this family. Jack Ryan is always going to do the right thing, right? That's what we all love about Jack Ryan. He's the Boy Scout. He's going to do the right thing for the country, whether it's good for him or not, 100% of the time. He's the president we all want to have. But how far can that go when it's your own child, right? And so the title is meant to sort of tease out that idea of when it's your child that's there, can you trust yourself that the decisions you're making are objective and what's best for the world and your nation, or are they selfish and for the best of your family? And that's what Jack has to struggle with in this book while he's trying to figure out what's happened to Kyle and help him.
Well, it's a terrific book. You're going to exit on a high note, right? Which I love.
I'll tell you the other thing we love about this one is for our Marine brothers, we got to focus, we always try to focus on one big military piece, right? So in Act of Defiance, we got to go back to the submarine warfare community. We got to somehow make special, or not special, but surface warfare look sexy in Defense Protocol. I'm joking. We were very impressed by what we learned about that community. And so here, we thought this might be our last book, and one thing we had not done was focused on big Marine expeditionary. And so one of the key characters in this book is the Marine Expeditionary Unit that's aboard the amphibious ready group and is ready to. So you haven't seen a major amphibious landing in quite a long time in the world. And I don't know, maybe you're going to see one in this book.
Right. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Exactly.
Right, we do. And I was, the one time that I visited Annapolis in the Naval Academy, which I loved, I'm under the impression that the Marine cadets, they also eat, but they eat separately.
No.
They don't?
Jack went to the academy, so you can speak
it was
better to
Jack,
this.
sorry.
All the midshipmen are
Undifferentiated.
Naval Academy midshipmen.
Right.
You can elect to go surface warfare. You can elect to go aviation. You can elect to go Marine. You can elect to go Marine aviation. You can elect.
Okay.
But all the Naval Academy midshipmen are Naval Academy midshipmen.
Okay, so they
the Marines are really just our little private army. So.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. All right, Jack.
Check the room before I.
So for those of you who are interested in legacy publishing, we should tell you how it works.
Tell me how it works.
Well, all right. So basically, to really come back to the very roots of it, every author gets to decide if, in the event they retire or die, whether someone else can continue to write in their universe. And to do that, they really should create a literary estate and have a literary executor. I try to lecture every author coming here that they ought to do that.
Yes, she does. Usually over dinner.
Ideally, the executor should not be a person related to you or a person who has any financial stake in the outcome, right? Because that could skew it. But it doesn't always work that way. So with the Robert Parker universe, his sons maintain the Parker estate. And Bob either didn't address it or left it open. I don't, or maybe did address it, but whatever. So there are multiple authors who have written in the Robert Parker universe. Ace Atkins, who will be here tomorrow night, wrote 10 Spencers, for example. So you have to have the estate approval, and then the estate has to hook up with a publisher, and the publisher has to agree that it's economically feasible, and then they usually appoint an editor or a coordinator, who's usually Tom Colgan at the moment. And I don't know how he does all the work that he does, right? Right. So people contract to it, but the estate has an approval process. And people enter and then they leave, and then new people are recruited, and so it goes. But you guys know more than I do. What kind of conditions are set for you when you come in to write in a legacy world? How much latitude do you have, and how much are you can't like go back and make up the Ryans all over again. You can't make Jack Ryan Sr. not the president, for example.
Right.
That's pretty obvious.
I mean, I think it differs from estate to estate
Right.
and from managing editor to editor. In our case, with respect to the Clancy universe, the estate is pretty hands off when it comes to plot and story and sort of geopolitics, where you want to go with that. But there are certain things that are verboten. So, I mean, Jack Ryan cannot be an immoral actor, right? He's always got to be a Boy Scout. He's going to do the right thing. He's going to have courage. And we're never going to have Jack Ryan having an affair or divorcing his wife or, things like that. So these are sort of some guardrails, I would say, that going in. But those aren't things, we're not the type of guys that want to change that anyway, right? So we're looking to sort of embrace the canon of the characters and who they are and make them the best versions of themselves and challenge them with inside those parameters in a way that is hopefully very exciting and new and fresh for you as the readers, as opposed to being just audacious and trying to do something shocking. I think that's something that we see a lot in social media and just the news and in the world in general, and that's not our jam. That's not what we're here to do.
So I will say that in the Clancy universe, it's much. We've written in more than one. It's very easy in the Clancy universe, and that's a testament, in my opinion, to Tom Colgan. He has proven himself for so many decades to be trustworthy that I think it's not that the estate has approval, but to the best of our knowledge, they've not approved or disapproved anything in years. And it's not because they're not interested and not because the lawyers aren't doing their job. It's because they have that much trust in Tom. And so for us, it's a little easier because as authors, we deal with only Tom. And we've worked with other places where that was not the case, and it's a lot more work. And
I'm sure it is. But I mean, going back to the beginning, when anybody starts writing a series of their own, you make decisions, and you can't later in the series go back and decide that your guy is like 6 feet tall or, all kinds of things. So those decisions were made for you, those basic decisions, and they still are true. But then, as we've talked about, the ability to move them forward and adapt is up to you.
Absolutely. The other thing that makes it easy in Clancy, though, is, for us at least, is we're huge Clancy fans. You know what I mean? Like, we would be just as outraged if something changed in that universe as anyone in the room, because we're readers first of the Clancy series before we ever wrote in it. And so that part is actually pretty easy for us. We would never want to make Jack into something that he's not. We love Jack. And so I can see how it might be more difficult in a series you didn't feel connected to as a reader before you started writing in it. But for us in Clancy, those issues, they're legitimate, they're true, but they're not difficult.
Most of the people that we've talked to in Legacy Publishing were fans of whatever series they signed on to. I can't make it, that's not a universal. But also you guys served in the military, so you have, some idea of how it works. And Jack, why don't you and Brett come up here and I'll move aside. We can move in a chair because you guys should be in here giving us your insights as well. There's a chair over there. I think there are 2 chairs over there. Right. I can move down. We can do it this way. I love getting off and on this chair. It's so ungraceful. Right. You might want to shove this way because otherwise we're going to lose Brett on the camera, is what I was saying. Right. Because this part you guys should really be addressing, not me.
All right.
Okay. I'll stand over here. There we go. Right. So, all right. So your thoughts, Jax?
I mean, what they said is I pretty much have to echo that. I was a fan first and foremost, and it's kind of unique. They wrote Griffin before me. They wrote the Presidential Agent series, Rogue Asset #9, and so they advanced the story. And so I was lucky enough to not only have the first 8 books of this series that that he wrote, but then I had theirs, and they had introduced new characters, and so it was even a bigger sandbox I got to play in. And one of the things that always stood out to me about Griffin in particular is that all his characters were all connected in some way. So-and-so's dad was classmates at West Point with this guy's dad, and they crossed paths in ways that made a big world seem really small. And so that's what I tried to do with my book, with Direct Action. I wanted to bring that feeling back of connecting characters, and so as you read through my book, there's going to be scenes. Well, by the way, I have to say one of the best things you did was pick a Naval Academy graduate, because that gave me a really good sandbox to play in, because I was a graduate of the Naval Academy. So there are scenes that go back to when he was a midshipman at the Naval Academy. And I'll say right now, you're going to run into a midshipman, Brad Trosclair, from New Orleans, Louisiana. He's actually my best friend and was one of my roommates. So I threw him in there as a character. And now you know the truth.
Only once did the Griffins. It was late in Mr. Griffin Sr.'s, so his son was writing them at that point, and they came here one time. So I don't have as much background in the Griffin series as I do where, we've had some repeat visits. And I often wondered how it would be if writing as the son of the author as opposed to being completely, unrelated, whether that would make life more complicated, writing a legacy thing.
Yeah, I will say the son is definitely heavily involved in it, and as he should be, because I know that I would want to protect my own father's legacy, and it would be hard to hand that off to somebody else, who wasn't in the family. And that's one of the things that when I took the job that I really wanted to do was pay respects to the fact that, hey, not only can I write this story, but I can do it in a way that honors your father's legacy. And so that's what I was telling the son, and I hope I did that. I hope that as fans of the series read it, they're going to see that I really did try to pay respect to what his father did.
Right. So, Brett, even though Stewart died suddenly and there wasn't a lot of preparation there, he had been working. I remember Parnell Hall was writing the Teddy Fay books, so there had been some of that going on by the time.
My first book with him was Obsession, which was a Teddy Fay book when he was still alive, and in fact I turned it in, and 2 weeks after I turned it in is when he passed away.
Right.
So and then I thought that was it, I'm not in it anymore, and then they called, and a few months later he said, he was actually halfway through the next Stone Barrington book, and we'd like you to finish it, and you have 2 months. And so I said, sure, I'll do that.
Stewart wrote even faster.
Yeah, he wrote really fast. But I was the first one to write in the Stone series. He was always just him. I was a fan of the series back in the 90s when it first came out. I read the first, I think, 10 or so, and just was eating those up back then. And then so many other books got out or are out there. I think I just kind of lost the path at some point. So I hadn't been keeping up with it, and I had no idea who Teddy Fay was at first because I hadn't been keeping up. And he came in much later. So when they called me to do that, I had to quickly do some research of my own. I went and listened to all the Teddy Fay books, and then selected books within the series, the Stone series, where he had appeared, just to get myself into the headspace of those books. So I had to relearn the Stuart Woods universe, and then eventually what I have done is I do this by audio because it's the quickest way I can do it, and I usually do all my reading by audio these days. But I listen. There are, let's see, Near Miss, the one that I finished for him, was the 64th book in that series. And so I have listened to the whole series now at least twice and selected books multiple times just to get myself into the headspace. And one of the things that I really wanted to do, especially in these early books, is kind of what you guys have been alluding to, is I wanted to bring things that he had done in other books, like characters where they finished their story, but I always thought there might be more to talk about this one thing that happened to this one character who you don't see again after that. Or, he's seeded some information about things that he's said to certain people or he's gotten for certain people. And I bring those forward. And so, I had a character in Finders Keepers last summer that Stone helped out 15 books ago. And now I have these people who are coming after that guy in Finders Keepers because it was kind of an unfinished loop. There was still a chance that this guy was going to get in trouble, in my opinion. And so I wanted to kind of play that whole story out. And so I've done that in most of the Stone books so far. I have had at least a little bit, if not a lot, of echoing back to little threads that have been left in the other books.
So, is there any family involvement in the?
As far as my main contact is with my editor at Putnam,
Right.
And she sends to Stewart's, to the estate's now agent,
Right.
Anne, her name's Anne, and Anne will read it and then she'll send it on to Stewart's widow. And usually I'll just get a little bit of feedback, and I think it's mostly from Anne. And I think I'm sure his widow. I know she trusts Anne, but she might have a few things that she filters through Anne. But it's usually just like 2 or 3 notes because we've really gone through everything to that point to just try to the editor and I to get it to where it needs to be. So it's pretty hands off in a way. I mean, I don't want to say their hands are off. They're definitely involved, but they have been very happy, thankfully, to this point. So,
Do you know, every once in a while I have a vision of you because Stewart wrote 4 books a year, which was really a killer pace, and so now you're Stewart, and I'm now envisioning him having co-authors to be writing Stewart. I mean, I could see that. It would be kind of fun. So let's talk a bit about your other series, the Tier 1. And the adversary, which is here, but also what is it that you guys are forging on to do? Because it affects Jack and other people that we know about. Here, I don't need this mic. Oh, sorry. You got now. Well done. No, seriously, tell us about your new project.
We have some exciting news. Our primary publisher is Blackstone, and we love the family at Blackstone, and they approached us about starting a new imprint to carry on stories very similar to the Andrews and Wilson ethos, which is stories of sacrifice and commitment, patriotism and service. And so we're launching. It's called Andrews and Wilson Entertainment, AWE.
Yeah. So it's at Blackstone. Blackstone has grown very rapidly over the last decade. I mean, enormously.
Well, they're an audiobook.
And they started as the books on tape guys, right? And now they're an enormous powerhouse in publishing. And it is a little unusual to be the size that they've grown to and not have imprints. And so I think they had that awareness that we should start to break things out so that when you see a Blackstone title, when you see Berkeley, when you see Putnam, you kind of know what you're getting. When you see Blackstone, it's everything from romance to children's to picture, everything, right? And so they were ready to do that, and thrillers is an enormous part of their business, and so we were flattered that they thought to do that. It doesn't mean that all thrillers will fall under it. We're not the acquisition editors for Blackstone, so we don't pick the authors that come to Blackstone, but we do have a say over who gets to come under our imprint. And so just because it's a military thriller or just because it's a covert ops thriller or whatever doesn't mean it will be under AWE. It has to have that same ethos like what Jack writes. It has to be team and mission before self. It has to be morally stable characters. It's got to be all of those things that makes our brand. And so there'll be things in there other than military thrillers. They'll all be thrillers, but there'll be some speculative books and things like that, but they all have to sort of fall in that branding.
So what about the movie or other parts to this whole thing?
Oh, jeez.
Well, real quick, as part of that announcement, we're really, really honored and just humbled to have Jack Stewart agree to write a book, hopefully a series, in the AWE imprint. So, woohoo!
Yay. Yeah, Jack, and you know, it's going to look a little bit like we're just having all our friends over for the holidays. Jack is going to be writing with us. Josh Hood is going to be writing with us, who we've known and loved for years. Don Bentley is going to be writing with us. So yeah, we're sort of like getting the band back together almost. Like, yeah, it's going to be a lot of people, and then there'll be some debut authors as well. We're going to bring up some new writers, but mostly it's going to be a bunch of guys having fun. So.
As you're finessing the video or the film question, are you not?
Oh no, happy to talk about that. I just couldn't miss the opportunity since Jack's sitting here, and we're really excited about his new book and yes.
That's normal.
Totally. We've been very active. Part of the exciting thing about being storytellers is, you know, we have books in every format, and we've done quite well on Audible. And I think listening to our books being performed by these amazing voice actors really helped inform, you know, a passion for us to get our content into different channels, film and television being the number one priority. So over the last 4 years, we've been very active. We don't advertise all the things that we've done, but we have a couple dozen different projects in various stages of development for film and television. We have a lot of exciting partners that are working to bring, you know, various projects adapting novels, but also short stories to the big and small screen. Legendary Entertainment has optioned Tier 1 series. It's under development there for television, and looks like we're going to attach a really exciting showrunner.
Yeah, can't talk about that name, but we can talk about Peter.
Yeah.
Right? So we have Peter Johnson and Marcus Blakely are attached to produce that series, and we're very close to being able to say who the showrunner is going to be. So that series is going. What are some others we can talk about? The Shepherds is close to closing at Lionsgate. We have a project with Mark Evans based on our novel 4 Minutes. Looks like it's gonna be a feature film. Mark is attached as the producer. We have a bunch of different things, but one of the cool things to tie that back to Andrews and Wilson is to celebrate the launch of the imprint. One of the things that Josh Stanton, who's the CEO of Blackstone, who's also a dear friend, great guy. We love anyone who loves our books. So he had this idea that we could take a lot of what we do in Hollywood is obviously all of our novels they're out there if you want to adapt them, right? But to take news stories, we have this model where we develop things in both spaces. So we don't necessarily write the book until we know it's going to move in somewhere else other than our tentpole series. So 4 Minutes started that way. 4 Minutes was a treatment that we sold to Skydance, and then it became a novel. So a lot of the things that we sold as short stories. And so Josh had this great idea. What if, for the fans of Andrews and Wilson, now that we launched the imprint, we celebrate the imprint by every month that we don't release a book, we're going to release an Audible and Kindle version of the novella-length shorts that we've sold in Hollywood. And so every story, because we can't make announcements, but they can't tell us we can't publish the stories. And so this is sort of a way to get a hint of what we have going on in Hollywood is all of these stories. The first one comes out actually, is it next week?
On December 20th. It's
The
called
20th, okay.
First Ranger.
And that's a cool one. It's a historical. If you know who Knowlton was, Thomas Knowlton is the father of American Special Operations. 1775, George Washington said, "Hey, this isn't going so great for us with the British, and we need to do something different than standing in lines shooting at each other." And so he employed Thomas Knowlton, who was a militiaman who had already served and served well, and he said, "I want you to start this new thing." And we won't tell you too much more than that, but it is based on the true story of Thomas Knowlton and his contribution to special operations. So that's our first one in that series of shorts that comes out this month, and then there'll be one every month that there's not a book. So
Yeah, and one fun thing about it is, you know our military thrillers, but we have these are like little appetizers, and so like each story is like he said, First Ranger. That's a military historical thriller. It's the first historical thriller that we've written. It's a short, but it has a different feel, and we have some speculative stuff and some science fiction
Horror.
and some
We
horror.
have one
yeah.
called Minotaur coming out in the spring. That's a film that's probably going to move pretty quickly. So we hope to have that actually greenlit this over 26. So that short story comes out. That's one of our favorites. It's completely off brand for us, but really fun story. So yeah, we're going to see lots of different things.
Wonderful. I love it. So I can just abandon all other publishers and just stick to these guys and run the bookstore. It'll be great. I realized that time got away from us slightly because we had all these exciting things to talk about. We have maybe 5 or 6 minutes for questions. If anybody'd like to ask one, Brian, do you want to?
I have a question.
You have to repeat it for the camera.
I'm just curious about character development. I'm a big fan of characters. And how, as you guys write for legacy characters and continue on the estates, how do you bring in, how do you keep a person like me who's maybe a casual reader from walking through Poison Pen, picking up executive power, and not getting lost on maybe who even Jack Ryan is? Maybe I never read a Tom Clancy before in my life. So how do you go back and bring back characters that maybe Greeny introduced or somebody else and still engage a reader with a current book?
That's a great question. He's asking, how do you, in especially a long-running series, bring a new reader up to speed with characters that have existed, in many previous books? I think, lots of authors do it in very different ways. Daniel Silva's quite talented at it. He always gives just a quick little 1 or 2 liner at the beginning of every book about who Gabriel Allan is, and so I think a lot of us take a page from him where, you just kind of subtly remind the reader of their title, what they've done, maybe a little bit of their pedigree, and then through the interactions with other characters and how those other characters perceive that person. They perceive them as noble. They perceive them as brave. They think about their history. And if you kind of just titrate that through the book, I think that you'll have a nice feel for who these characters are without the really obnoxious data dump that, sometimes new authors tend to use at the beginning of a book. And 5 pages later, you're like, why am I hearing 20 years of history? Can we get to the story?
Do you guys have a different answer for that?
No, that's my answer pretty much.
Yeah, what he said.
Okay, another question. There's one.
How do you make it doesn't maybe pertain to legacy, but if you're a new character, how do you decide how this person is going to age, if they're going to age? As an example, Jack Reacher's the same age he was 30 years ago.
So
And we heard Michael Connelly a couple of months ago say he wished he hadn't given Harry Bosch a birthday because he's too old. And Jack Ryan went from a teacher to a president, from 25 to 50 or 70. So what's the thought process on how you age him, and do you age him?
Oh, I'd like to answer that one if I could. So one of my favorite authors growing up was Stephen Kuntz, and The Flight of the Intruder was, I think, still is probably the best book about naval aviation. And I just went back and read it recently, and it still holds up. And it took place in the Vietnam War. And if you follow it along, the same thing happened where he ended up promoting, and now he becomes the president, and it ends up being this big thing. And so when I wrote my Battleborn series, I did not want that to happen because all the cool stuff happens when you're a lieutenant or below. When you get up, you're doing PowerPoint presentations and briefings, and it's boring. And so I think it's incumbent upon the author to realize where the action is, and the tendency is to want to get bigger geopolitically or up the chain. And so now that I'm taking over the reins of the Jack Ryan Jr. series, I'm sort of finding that same thing. I'm looking at Jack Ryan Jr. and what he originally started as. I'm trying to kind of bring him back to that because if you advance him too far, then you kind of get lost. That character becomes lost.
That's a great answer. And if you ask 5 authors, you'll get a different answer. And even for us in multiple series, it's a different answer in different series. In Tier 1, which is sort of our tentpole series, we made a decision early on that we're going to let time go. Okay, so but if you're going to do that, the risk is what Jack is saying, right? If you got this one character and he's the only focal point of your series, and now he's in a wheelchair and 94 years old. Like, what are you going to do with that? So what we've done very intentionally in Tier 1, if you've read the Tier 1 series from book 1 to book 9 that just came out, and we just turned in book 10, what you'll find is that, yeah, we still have Dempsey, but Dempsey has changed dramatically in these 10 books. And the other thing we've done is we've brought other characters in. And we've also taken characters out, which was sometimes difficult and heartbreaking. We've killed, when Shane Smith died, like I wept, like literally wept. It was very difficult. And so in that series, we decided that we wanted to keep it kinetic and moving and aging, but we wanted to do it in a way that was realistic and, to Jack's point, supported the action. And so Dempsey, you can already see that the Dempsey in this book is definitely not the Dempsey in Tier 1, right? Like, he's definitely different. He's still in the game, but he's already, even in his internal monologue, he's thinking about what's his next season, what's his next step. And we have his son, who is now graduated from Buds, and he's with his own SEAL team, and they're trying to figure that relationship out. So that's one way you can do it, is you can just let it evolve the way it does in real life through multiple relationships.
You can, but there's a reader complicity in all this. Most readers do not really want these characters to age. And I mentioned Spencer earlier. I mean, he was a Korean War veteran, and he's still, on the streets of Boston and working out with Henry at the gym and the whole. But readers go along with that. But here's the thing: the one thing that you can't age, the dogs can't get any older. It is really, because we do a lot of canine crime here and all, and the readers are never going to accept the idea that the dog is aging out or the cat. No, I'm really serious, So I think it is a kind of, a bargain that, readers make. And, to your point, Harry Bosch never wanted to be like, a senior detective, or, the superintendent and all. He wanted to be on the street all the time. And that is what made it so hard when he got older, is that he couldn't just sit at a desk. He didn't want to do that. So,
If you don't put a date in, like you were saying, we never put a date in Tier 1. So the first book came out 2016, but the time is not passed in the same rate. Like about 3 years have passed in Tier 1 universe.
I think that's a key too, because I have in my Jonathan Quinn series, which is 16 books so far, they're definitely aging a little bit, but a lot happens in those 16 books. But time passage, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years. Yeah, exactly.
It's a book a week.
Yes, exactly. But in like the Stone Barrington series, Stone, he's aged a little bit from book 1 to book 64, whatever I'm at now. But he's still amorphous, where he's at. Although he does now have a son who he didn't have at the start of the book, who's now like in his 20s and has won an Academy Award. So, certain characters age, but not all of them. It just depends on the series you're writing and what's expected, I guess.
And if you're writing historical thrillers, which some people do, you can actually start the next book the day after the one before ends, and aging never comes into it because they're already aged, and there's some very good historical thrillers. I was really thrilled to see that somebody is going to make a movie of Rogue Male, which is one of my all-time favorite thrillers. And, it took place a long time ago, and it'll be really interesting to see whether they decide to make it modern or whether they decide to keep it back in the, whenever it was, the 30s, 20s, I can't remember. It's a foundational thriller. It truly is. It's just a brilliant book. I can't remember who it is that's going to bring it back to the screen. So is there one final question that anybody would like to ask? No. All right. Well, then we'll move to the giveaway part. Yay. I have 2 things here. That one of them is a book bag for one of the thrillers going on is by Mick Herron. Those of you who may have been watching the Slough House series on television. I'm trying to remember. They don't actually call it Slough House. Slow Horses. Thank you, Slow Horses. And so this is a book bag that they gave us to celebrate the fact that they had brought out a collector edition of the first book in that Mick Herron series. He's a British author. And so I have put a book inside it. two books inside it, actually. One is a book that will be signed here Sunday by Cara Black, and it is a post-World War II France thriller. And it's sort of a prequel to her long-running 20-book detective story, and it's about her grandfather and about a young woman who was raped by a German soldier and generally shunned, and how she made her way amazingly in the movie business, where she was able to do creative accounting and help the guy do well. So there's so many aspects to World War II. It's just the richest field to mine, right? But this is one example of it. And the other book, if I turn it around, do you guys want to talk about Simon and Ryan? You know, yeah, this is their book, their cooperation, The Second Son here, which just came out.
So we talk about how it's a small community. We all know Simon Gervais and Ryan Steck, and they've been friends of ours, sort of grown up in the thriller writing community for years now, and they're writing this collaboration for Thomas and Mercer, and I think it just came out as a Kindle First Reads this month, and it's doing really well. So highly recommend checking this one out, The Second Son.
All right, so John, what numbers we got? 9. Thank you. Okay, I love John. He always announces it firmly. So, no. Oh, I'm sorry. I should. All right. That was how many numbers we had to choose from. It wasn't. But this happened the other night. That's okay. That's all right. It'll be yours.
You win.
You win.
Yay!
Right? You absolutely do. All right, number 9 gets it. Okay, so the other.
You win. You do. You won, you lost, but now you won again.
Since I failed to explain the mechanics, it's not fair if you don't win it. So we're going to make you win it. This large bag here is from Thriller Fest, which is the going into its 21st year as an organization supporting thriller writers and helping people get published and all sorts of other stuff.
You met there. We as a group met him there. Yeah.
Do you know I started it? So it started here at a Poison Pen conference at the Arizona Biltmore. I was there. That's right, you were. Yeah, I know. I don't drink often, but I was drinking that night. And the thriller writers, who were a really interesting group, including Lee Child and Kathy Reichs and Steve Hamilton and Vince Flynn, were all unhappy with the fact that they had not won awards and generally been respected in the Mystery Writers of America. And I listened to that for quite a while. And Clive was there, and I'd had a second drink, and I finally slammed my glass down on the bar, and I said, go start your own fucking organization. And they did. So David Morrell and Gail Lynns were there, and they agreed to take it on. But that actually is, James Patterson immortalized that in the introduction to the first thriller volume. So anyway, it's a great organization, and this next year, 2026, I'm going to be the thriller legend in New York, and my contribution is going to be, I have awarded enough money for scholarships for 4 authors who have gotten a book contract but have never done a book event, and we like to do that. We like to have people here with their first books and kind of break them in, so to speak. And so there are 4 scholarships now for that, for people who have got a contract but have yet to go off and do an event. And then I'm going to do a panel with authors whose first books were signed here. So it'll be really kind of fun. Anyway, I'll get another bag, so I don't mind giving this one away. That's how that works out. And there's a whole bunch of books in it. So you have a range between 1 and 8. Of course, we're leaving out 9. You pick a number, and that person wins. 1 and 8, 4. Yep, 4. Okay, who's number 4? It's you. Well, you deserve it because you are here on a frequent basis. So let's thank our authors for coming tonight.